Hey, how are you? Hold on just a second, okay? Let's get everything set up and get some more people to join us. I'll pull it up here and we'll get it rolling in just 1 second. Good morning. How are you? Okay. Says I'm live. Let's see here. Hey, I see it on LinkedIn. All right, we've got it live on LinkedIn. I think we have a live broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? People are piling on. Kurt, what's happening? Fernando, how are you? Let me just say generally to all of you, how are you? This is a very strange time. I don't dwell on it. Sometimes I feel like I want to. So I'm just going to acknowledge this with you, and then we're going to dive in just a little bit. Hey, Karen, Sanjay, what's happening? It's still a strange time. On the one hand, I'm excited and very scared about the opening up, at least here in the States, that's taking place. As you know, other places like Germany are starting to shut down again. We need to get life moving. On the other hand, man, boy, do we have to be safe. And it just feels creepy. So no matter where you fall politically or on this issue, I'll bet you that we share this in common. It's creepy. So at a minimum, whatever you're doing, I hope you're being safe. I know I am. I don't go out unless I need to or to walk, and then I stay away from people. And yes, I wear a bandana. It looks like I'm going to rob a bank or something. It's kind of funny. Hey, Ellie, how are you? Omar, Philip, good to see you. Alberto, Ivan, nice, wonderful, wonderful. I'll just leave that out there. I hope that you're being safe. I am still enjoying the pivot. There's a word that's been overused way too much, the big pivot. What do you do when someone throws you a curveball? Life does that. Well, you pivot. You deal with it in the most creative, productive way you can. And for me, that means increase the proportion of writing in my life. I've always said I wish I had more time because I love writing and I produce a lot of tweets and blogs and books and courses. And now I've got the time. And guess what? I'm killing it. I'm kicking out writing left and right. I'm very excited. And I think this is my new normal. And I think I'm excited about it. I have no doubt we will return to professional speaking again someday. I've been doing some of it online, but the live stuff in person is great. I've got some on the calendars for later this year. So I'm pretty excited about that. Hey, there's Laura. How are you? Mecca, good, good. Ephraim, how are you? I'm excited. So today, what are we going to talk about? One of my favorite topics, you'll see me talk about this time and again because it's close to my heart. It's what I do. It's partially how I earn a living, and that is storytelling. So let's think about what it is, why it matters, where you might do it, and I'm going to share a story with you and maybe even talk about that for a minute. And as always, while you're listening to me in my caffeinated rant, I hope you will write down a question or just drop your question right there in the comments. And my trusty mentor / better half / moderator, Cheryl, will grab that question and put it on a doc here so that I can see it. So storytelling. Well, storytelling fits into this bigger topic around communication. Communication, huge topic, many slices. Listen carefully. It's important. You should care. Here's what we know about professional success. It is determined somewhat by your IQ and abilities at work in the cognitive sense. That is true. We know that. It's also true that a major portion of where you go, your success, comes down to not the IQ or the expertise per se, but your communication skills. How you know how to use what's between these ears out here to connect with other people, to empower other people, to make other people productive, and to make sure that your ideas are understood and thus possibly acted on. Communication skills. I am always distraught at how little we have focused on communication skills in our educational systems. We know it's so central to success in life. It's so central to solving the challenges, the conflicts, everything that we face, but we don't give it enough attention. I love talking about it. I've got courses on it. I've written about it. If you see me on LinkedIn Learning, look, don't just watch me. There are so many authors talking about aspects of communication. I've got several there, for example, dedicated to presentations and aspects of presentations that you might want to check out. 3, if I recall, and my link meister might drop 1 or 2 or 3 of those in the comments for you to check out. But a central theme to all of them is storytelling. The idea is very simple. If you're smart, you might recognize the need to share some information with someone, great. But sharing a fact or an idea is one thing. How do you make sure they understand? More importantly, if they understand, how do you make sure they remember, they feel it, not just understand it? So there are levels here, as you can see. First, you got to get it out in some fashion that makes them understand it, and then hopefully they can feel it and remember it. Stories are a mechanism that I think are still underused that help people do that. Elio, Adrian, Tariq, Gary, how you doing, man? Fernando, Jill, hi Jill, good to see you. Lots of good people jumping on here. Stories are something I did not know were going to become central to my life, but they do. You, as a professional, listen, you're not a leader, great. You're a formal leader, you're an executive, wonderful. It's important to you. There are many roles. I think any professional role, but there are some dedicated to the need to understand story making. Think about marketing and various aspects of marketing. Think about fundraising. There are many, but especially my friends who have influence over others, who are managers or who are executives. Do not miss out on the opportunity. Now look, how about duration? You're not supposed to do this every day. That makes you a person who's predictable, and every day they go, okay, here comes the story. Thanks, storyteller. Maybe not every day. Most people avoid it because it's not natural, and we're not taught to do it. It's not natural at work. It's quite natural. Humans are prone to sharing stories because we've all been through so many journeys that lend themselves to telling stories. So how often should you do this? I want you to remember that if you're a manager or an executive, if you're not telling a story a week, worst case 2 per month, you're missing out on an opportunity to not just share ideas you have to share or want to share, but making sure they stick, because this thing happens. It's emotions when you're telling stories. So let's talk about why that's true. Well, because just telling you an anecdote about something that happened to me, that's one level of information. But if I wrap it into story, now we've got characters. Characters are things people know about from all of our lives, reading and watching television and movies, plays. Characters, people we can follow and relate to and understand. It makes it more personal immediately. That's interesting, isn't it? And then people go through things as characters. There's plot, there's action. That draws people in. They know you're going somewhere and want to know what happens, what's the punchline, what's the resolution. It's interesting, isn't it? It makes you far more human, by the way, when you learn to tell a story. Now, before I go further, I'm going to tell you this, and I don't like saying this, and I don't say it very often at all. But the truth is, this is not a basic skill level type thing. Okay? A whole lot of what I do, and I'm proud of this, I have no problem with this. A whole lot of what I do, you might think of as beginner and sometimes intermediate skill level things around the world of leadership, teams, communication, what have you. This storytelling is not one of them. This is maybe in some ways intermediate, maybe in a lot of ways advanced, because there are so many parts and you need to have comfort with it to do it correctly, to make it feel like it's not rehearsed or nervous, make it feel like it's natural, that is to say, make it feel like it is authentic. There's that word you're used to hearing me say. So let's talk about that. Well, if you know anything about the structure of a show, of a play or a book, you think of those 3 acts. You got some sort of introduction. Hey, here are the players. You've got some sort of problem or conflict that happens that stops them from getting where they want to go. And then you've got some sort of climax or resolution in the 3rd act. Something of that nature tends to be the flow that you're looking for, the general structure that you're looking for in terms of a story. And I would add one thing on top of that. And this is really overlapping with the instruction I would give anyone when they're thinking about giving a presentation. And that is, first and foremost, not just an introduction, but the front part of the introduction, which is a hook. You have to grab them. If you're going to tell a story, you do not want them waiting around saying, hey, why is this relevant? Should I listen or should I tune out? You want them to know that this makes a lot of sense. Listen, you can use a story, again, not every day, but once a month, twice a month. Come on. I think once a week, if you're a manager or a boss, you can do it in that recurring monthly meeting, that recurring weekly meeting. We have too many recurring meetings, don't we? You can do it in the hallway when you have a chance to meet someone for 5 minutes and have an impromptu conversation. Yeah, sometimes a little short story makes the point, or just recounting something you went through. That's a basic way to start getting familiar with and comfortable with telling stories. But what I'm really thinking about today is a little more of the structured approach, the thoughtful, planned approach that you might take into a meeting, you might take into a big phone call, you might take to a conference when you're speaking, or like me, when I'm paid to stand on stage and educate and motivate. So let's talk about stories. Let me, hey, how are you, Maria? I see people, hi Gail, I see people jumping on. Wonderful to see you guys. Listen, there's so many people listening right now who are managers, and that's why stories matter. Just remember this. We don't have enough emotion at work, and memory management is hard. Now, when I say emotion at work, don't get all ruffled. We have lots of unnecessary or unpleasant emotion. Unnecessary would be negative things that people bring. Unpleasant would be stress-related emotions that we all experience. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about positive emotions. Do you know who sets the ceiling, the maximum limit for how much positive emotion is experienced at work? The answer is your boss. There's a lot of answers, but the best answer is your boss. Now, if you're a boss man, I hope you are listening to me today. People need more positive emotion. A story is an amazing vehicle for the use of positive emotion to lift people and to help them hear you and remember messages that are central to feeling good about work and to doing work right. What's that worth? A good story is worth a ton. It's central to understanding engagement and motivation. Let me slow down for just a minute and tell you a story. And then after I tell you the story, we'll debrief it just a little bit. And then maybe take some of your questions. So if you've got some now, or if you develop one in just a couple of minutes, hey, just drop your question in the comments. Hopefully I'll get to it in just a minute. So here's a story for you. Ready? You know, a lot of people look at me and they think I'm a fairly accomplished professional. Other people, well, they look at me and they just see a criminal. It's true. Think about this for just a minute. I have a very unique look. I'm bald. I'm tall, big male. That can be scary to some people. I'm covered in this stuff. I'm loud on top of that. Are you kidding me? A lot of people have a quick, clear reaction to it. But here's the funny thing. Their reaction is usually driven by this thing that we call a stereotype. Have you ever heard the word stereotype? What's that mean to you? It's pretty straightforward. Most people understand it. Yeah, stereotype is an efficient and often dangerously off or completely wrong way of thinking about something. Usually it's about group membership and things we erroneously think about those groups. For example, if some people, they might see a female, and about females, they might think certain things like, oh, they're too emotional, or who knows what they might think. Sometimes that's right about a particular female. Many times that's wrong. And certainly it's unfair to assume such things. We don't know who they are. That's the danger of a stereotype. Now listen, I've been stereotyped so many times, it's unbelievable. And yes, some people have assumed I'm a criminal. Why? Well, there's plenty of people who see this and assume something, well, let's just say it, that isn't terribly positive. Yeah, that's true. A lot of assumptions, a lot of stereotypes have been made about me over time. I remember once sitting on an airplane and I sat down next to a person who was in military attire. There was no guessing. It was obvious they were in the U.S. military. And I sat next to them on an airplane and, well, when you're in close quarters, conversation happens. And they looked at me, just a quick glance, and said to me, hey, where did you serve? And I found out in conversation with this really nice gentleman, he saw the bald head. the tattoos assumed I was in the military, or at least maybe was in the past as well. Just a stereotype. Sometimes it gets you in trouble. Sometimes it's funny. Either way, it can be dangerous. My job is to make you think about that, less likely to do that. Yeah, people thought I'm a criminal. I've been followed in malls. I had the audacity to walk into a mall in a sleeveless t-shirt many years ago when I had started getting these tattoos. And I got to tell you, man, it didn't take just a minute for the rent-a-cop there to follow me store to store. To him, I looked suspect. Did I? I don't know, but to him, I did. He thought I looked problematic, maybe even criminal. Happens all the time. I remember one time I got off work back in the day working for Ernst & Young, very large, awesome. Then it was my employer. Now they're one of my clients. I do some speaking time and again with Ernst & Young, great people. I was a young 20-something professional, and I was going to go meet some of my colleagues after work for a drink, as sometimes people do. And I got off a little early, and I lived in Midtown Atlanta, and I walked down the street to the bar, first one there. Very excited. I had changed clothes, comfortable blue jeans, t-shirt, sitting at the bar, talked to the bartender, ordered a beer. Very happy. Bartender, hey, how you doing? I was like, I'm great, man. So what you up to? I said, well, just waiting on some friends. And no more, not kidding, true story, no more than 3 or 4 minutes later, this person, the bartender, returns to me and says, quietly, hushed tone, hey, I think your friends are here. And he was serious. He was trying to be helpful. And I looked where he was pointing. And what I saw surprised me. What do you think I saw? I saw a table full of skinheads. Skinheads, yeah, bald, tattoos, blue jeans. I politely turned to him in a low tone so no one would hear me. And I said, those are my friends. And the awkwardness passed and we moved on. But that happened. Stereotypes will get you in trouble. Now, I tried to find an interesting way. Back in the day, the career before my current career was in the classroom, in the ivory tower, being a professor, writing and teaching. I love that job. And I wanted to find colorful, impactful ways to make the students learn the lessons. Don't just share the facts. No, share a few stories on top of them to really drive the emotion, to really build some memorability into the idea. I really took that seriously. Here's a good example surrounding the idea of stereotypes. Now, back in the day before anybody on planet Earth had any idea who I was, I could get away with murder in class. And so I came in one night, first night of class, a new semester, a whole bunch of maybe 30 or so MBA students that were sitting there. And I'll never forget this. And I started talking about what we're going to do in the course, telling them about me a little bit, and then getting into the first night's small dose of material. And I was getting into some cognitive issues and cognitive bias and why we think the way we think and how it's good and how it's bad. And finally, I got to the issue of stereotypes. They really didn't know I was going to talk about that. So I told them, yeah, there's a few biases. I mentioned stereotypes. And then I said, you know what, let me just play a little game with you to bring to life what this idea is all about in a way that a simple lecture maybe can't do. And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw out a word and do not censor. I just want you, all of you, don't censor, just speak loudly. What's the first word? The stereotypical idea. What's the first stereotypical word that pops into your brain? Just say it. It'll be funny. Don't censor. No worries. No harm, no foul. Let's do this. And then I would say, professors. And you would have people say, boring. And things like that. And then I would laugh and they would laugh. We're breaking the ice. People were getting comfortable. And then I would say, that's great. How about this one? Executive. And people would say conservative, or sometimes successful, sometimes corrupt. They would say all kinds of things. And thankfully, they were loosening up and making the point about that quick, efficient thinking trap that is a stereotype. And that would make it a little harder once they loosened up. I would say, how about females? And they would make jokes about women, stereotypes about women. Then I would say men, and they would make jokes. And then I would say, how about felon? And they would say prison, ... Almost always in response to felon, someone would say tattoo. And I wouldn't miss a beat. I'm wearing a jacket or a long sleeve shirt just to hide them. They don't know me. No one knows me. And I say, tattoo, that's a great one. What's the stereotype? And they kept going like they'd been doing for 5 minutes. And I heard every manner of negative label you can imagine. I heard will regret, stupid, redneck, etc., etc. Negative label after negative label. I'm doing this activity one night. In the front row sat a woman in a red sweater. I will never forget her. I can see her clearly right now. We're doing this exercise. I say, tattoo, negative labels are coming at me. And she perks up in the middle of all this and goes like this, sexy. And everyone died laughing. It was spectacular. And then I took off the jacket that I was wearing that night, covering up my arms, and I rolled up my sleeves, and she turned a shade of red like nobody's business. Now, the point of the story is not that I had so much fun watching her turn red that evening. The point is that stereotypes are pervasive. The more we think about them, talk about them, the more they stay front of mind, the less we bring them into new situations and apply them to people, which means the faster we get to who a person really is. Now, what's that worth? I think that's priceless. Okay, that was me doing a story I haven't used on stage in several years, and I used to talk about in class. Hey, good. Thank you, Laura. Brian, good to see you, sir. Mary, lots of great people here. Listen, that's just an example. And to you, I say with respect, I know I do this professionally. I'm aware of that, but you can too. So let's break it down. What devices, what things were happening that allowed that story to actually work, to make you listen? Dare I say that I assume most of you were listening and wondering where I was going, or at least laughing about me and then thinking about yourself. Well, first of all, I made fun of myself. I didn't say, I'm bright, I'm handsome, listen to me. I didn't do any of that self-aggrandizing garbage. I made fun of myself. I told you about some awkward things. People thinking I'm a criminal. People thinking other things. I could go on, by the way. I've been accused of looking like a lot of stereotypes, which is very interesting. And then I talked about something that I love teaching, and some students who were participating. Many of you can relate to that as well. So they're characters, like I was saying, and you can relate to them. There was a challenge. I wanted to talk about a concept that matters. And then there was a conflict. I was saying awkward things to get them to say awkward things. And then a really awkward thing happened. A woman embarrassed herself, and she wasn't even trying to embarrass herself. How could she know that I had tattoos? And then we had a learning moment, which is the beautiful resolution where I could talk about it, because it had been brought to life, this concept. And believe me, those students emotionally felt that concept. They didn't just cognitively understand it. And that is when learning truly sticks. You'll also notice that I varied my pace. I varied my tone, and I allowed nonverbals to be a part of what I was doing. When you combined all of those, that is a communication punch in the face that helps people hear you, pay attention, and maybe even feel you as well. All right, Fernando, we have a question. It says, how do you structure a story? You know what? People still debate this, even though it's considered a classic. And the short answer is that you want to start by grabbing them. Now, how did I grab you? Does anybody remember how I grabbed you? I'll tell you how I did it. Within 10 seconds, I said that some people think I'm criminal. Think about that. That's a bold statement. Even for you folks who know me, that's a bold statement. It grabs you. At the front of a presentation, you can do this many, many ways. Now, I'm talking about stories today, not presentations. But for a presentation, it might be a picture or a statistic or a video or who knows, something visceral that helps people really get the whole thing you're going to talk about, like that, the punchline brought to life. Well, to tell you, I'm supposed to be some eminent educator and motivator. To tell you, sometimes people see a lot of professional yumminess in me. Other times, they just see a criminal. That is a crazy, beautiful thing to say that makes you go, what? And listen, that's a hook. That's grabbing them. So start with that. Then you introduce the characters. You set up what the big problem or challenge is. In my case, it was trying to take an idea that matters and bring it to life. How do you do that? I could share the idea, or I could bring it to life with emotion. In this case, it was talking about stereotypes. And then we got to have some sort of conflict or tension or ugliness, and that was the weirdness of me asking for things and them saying things that normally we don't say in public. That's a form of conflict. That's tension. And then it blew up even bigger when that woman was honest and used the word sexy to describe tattoos and how she felt about them, which gave us the final part of the structure, the resolution, the answer, the part after the climax and the tension, which was an educational moment where we got it. We're tuned in and we could talk for a few minutes as professor and students about what this cognitive bias really looks like and the trouble that it caused. And they were set up to have a little lecture and facilitated conversation because we started with an emotional, fun, relevant, personal story first. Great question. Jill, when telling a story about metrics, after helping them understand why they care, how do you keep them focused on the story and stay out of the weeds? It's a great question. You could be doing a presentation, telling a story, or having a conversation. And for an overly energized, diligent listener of you, well, they sometimes feel like they want to dive into something that you shared that was worthwhile. So first of all, if there is data, don't put it in front of them until you're ready to look at them and talk about the data. It's just like the old, do you pass out slides in a presentation? My short answer is no, you do not, if you don't have to. You want them to have something to take notes with. Of course, that's wonderful. Maybe a rough outline of slides, but certainly don't give them anything to read. I try to give them nothing except blank pages so that they will do what? Because if you give them something to read, they will do what? They will read it. If they have nothing to read, what will they do? Well, the odds go way up. They will listen to you. So that's number one. Give them what you want to deep dive on only when you're ready for them to deep dive. Number two, it is okay. It's usually only necessary one time to call someone out in a very positive way for apparently starting to take a deep dive and just say to them, hey, Suzanne, I see you diving in for a good swim on those numbers. Hold off for a minute. Stay with me. Let me make the 2 points I want to make, and then we're all going to do that together. Thanks. You say it positive. It took 5 seconds. Everyone gets the message. You're back into being a storyteller listened to by the team. And then you, on cue, can facilitate them starting into the next part of the conversation when you are ready to deep dive. I have to tell you, I honestly believe that telling stories is more useful, and everyone says they're useful. I think it's more useful because I believe we don't have enough positive emotion at work. We're so busy, we have trouble remembering things, and stories provide great memory management because they punch a little harder into the depths of your brain and stick. One of the greatest compliments anyone ever gives me is, I still remember that story. Yeah, we get new people on the team. It's usually pretty quick. I pull out the blah, blah story that I heard from you 5, 10, 15 years ago and make sure they get the point as well, because I can tell them about the point, but the story is so much better. I've heard versions of that a million times, and it touches my heart every single time. So let me wrap this by telling you, if you want a deep dive on this topic, you can go watch lots of things I've done. You can look around LinkedIn Learning's library, not just at me, but at many people who I think have some courses and movies on this topic, or just do some Googling. If you have a specific question, please feel free to send it my way. If we're not yet connected on LinkedIn, come on, reach out, let's connect. And in fact, if you haven't stopped by my website in the last few weeks, you really should. There's always a new blog post. I dropped one yesterday that I think you will really, really enjoy. It's called Be More, and I really enjoyed writing it, so I hope you'll check it out. And while you're there, drop in your email, sign up for the newsletter so you can keep up with what I am up to. And that's usually a lot. So follow me online and you can find out what I'm up to. I hope the week is treating you well and that the rest of it is productive and, hey, maybe even a little bit of fun. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next week on Wednesday for another live stream. Thanks, man. Take care.